Spiritual versus religious, I think that nowadays there's a big deal going on with people saying that I'm spiritual. I'm not really religious. And in fact, I think that there are some teachers, some spiritual teachers nowadays, who are making quite a bit of money off this and explaining, like, I'm a spiritual person, I'm not religious. But what if that's hurting you? What if that's not exactly right? Because a lot of these really, really great spiritual teachings came from these religions. So maybe, for someone who's like, let's say, following a religion just so dedicated that they follow every single line and they don't adapt it to modern day, that would be ignorant in some way, wouldn't it? We all see that, it's anybody who completely just like, no, this line in this book says to do this, I have to do it. But if the book was written about 4,000 years ago, it's not really smart to be making those decisions. You have to kind of make an adjustment. Isn't that right? And if you don't, and you're that stuck on something, it can be seen as ignorant. Well, how about if it goes the other way? How about if you just believe, I'm spiritual, but I don't have a teacher. I don't really have a guide. I just kind of make it up as I go. And the things that make me happy, I'm just going to keep on doing that. And now I'm spiritual. That's just as ignorant. I'm sorry to say if people get really offended by that, but the truth is, the religious stories that were told and the reason why they lasted so many years is because they work in many ways. Now, I'm not going to try to get you to follow any kind of religion in this video, okay? I'm not trying to say like, hey, join this religion or this is the one that I see works the best. No. I am Legendary Daddy. I believe in storytelling and I believe in the legends. These religions tell stories. And maybe if you look closely at the story, you'll realize why these stories have lasted so long. Why these religions are much more powerful than, let's say, Zoroaster. Or how come we don't follow Zeus nowadays, Why does it have to be Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha? Well, I want to talk to you about that today because I think if you look at their stories closely, just in a fun way, so if you feel that I'm not being respectful to your religion, you're on the wrong site then. Because this is pretty much just trying to find these heroes. The hero of Jesus, the hero of Buddha, the hero of Muhammad, and find out why these guys' stories and these guys who won in a certain way, why we still listen to those stories today, and why, in some way, they ring true. And maybe if you recognize that, and you just recognize them as stories, it'll help you on your spiritual path. Think about that. I am Legendary Daddy. This is my book, The Legendary Daddy, and this is the Legendary Daddy channel. Today, I want to talk to you about story in terms of bringing together spirituality and religion. So I'm going to be going over these religions from the point of view of a storyteller, okay? So like I said, maybe a little earlier, is if you are devout in your certain religion and you don't believe in the other ones, then maybe you should go to a different channel. Because when it comes down to it, I'm talking about these three people, Siddhartha Gautama, Muhammad, and Yeshua, Jesus, as three different heroes of their own different stories. And I want to explain this to you to see why they're heroes, because they are spiritual heroes. Okay? I'm going to start with Buddhism. So, when it comes to Buddhism, what do you think of? You think of people meditating, usually, You think of just alone, meditating on a hilltop, something serene, something peaceful. And that's not exactly all what Buddhism is about. So when you go back to the story of Buddhism, or the original stories, the most probably accurate stories are that this man was a spiritual teacher and he walked the earth and took donations from people, didn't work, just walked with his group. There was a group of followers that he had, and he would give these stories, these teachings, these parables, and there was wisdom in these stories. And that's why he had such a big following. He died at an old age, and his teachings lived on. Now, this is the thing that's kind of cool, is this is the way story works, is that as time went on, there was no real big stories about his beginnings or his childhood or what went on. But when you give a legend some time and you give it, a bunch of different people's minds and mouths to go through to be able to spread this story, the story changes drastically. So Siddhartha Gautama, who became the enlightened one, the Buddha, his story changed from his childhood to being born of a noble birth or a royal birth. He was also in story known as a prince. His father was supposed to be royal also, the king, whatever you want to think of him as. Just think of someone of royalty thinking, I want my son to be safe. I want my son to be safe in all ways possible. So we're going to build walls around this huge land that we have. And he's going to know nothing but just paradise. His life is just going to not know any of the pains of this world. And he grew. And this, the way the story goes is that the Buddha grew in this kind of a lifestyle. And he was spoiled, he was happy, he had fun, he even got married, had a child. And it wasn't until he left the grounds in a carriage and he sees suffering. He sees death. And he asks the carriage driver, like, why is this person on the street? Why do they not have a place? Why do they look sick? And then, the carriage driver discusses illness and death, and that we all suffer from death eventually. Now, for the boy who was raised in a perfect bubble, right, of paradise, and then all of a sudden this rude awakening of, holy cow, so wait, I'm going to be like that one day? That starts the Buddha's story. That's what gets everything going. I have to find a way to find peace. So he does. He leaves. He goes to the Brahmins and the Vedic priests from that time, and he studies under them. And there's so much of meditation and prayer and just mindfulness. And he does these things, and it's not getting rid of his panic, worry, suffering. Maybe you've seen pictures of him where the Buddha is completely starved, where he looks like he's only bones. This is what is the way the story goes. This is what he did to himself, to be able to try to fight his best, to do his best, to be able to get in contact with the divine, with something to be able to ease his pain and suffering. And what's crazy is that denying worldly pleasures was his path to get there. But the thing that actually switched him and made it finally kick in is when he realized, wait a second, I've been denying myself worldly pleasures, but the world is beautiful. It's actually a really beautiful place. And it said that he had milk and honey that was given to him. And he realized it's not all about suffering here. There is joy here. Right after that is when he sat under the Bodhi tree and began his meditation. And that's when the devils came after him and evil. It's like he had this wisdom all of a sudden and this joy and this happiness. And he was no longer torturing himself, and they came. In Buddhism, the devil is known as Mara. And Mara came with his whole army of monsters. And the Buddha just completely had peace, put his hand to touch the earth. Maybe you've seen that in pictures. Had complete peace. They fell at his side. They couldn't even touch him, couldn't even bother him. They tempted him with women. They tempted him with all these things, and he completely just kept his peace. And that's the day that he gained enlightenment. He went through and did what most of these people, I'm going to say, follow the archetype of prophet. He did what these prophets do, which is they go to the other side, come back and say, I have a message. I went beyond what is humanly possible, saw what this is all about, what this whole life is about, and now I have a message to tell you and something to teach you. And he gives us the Four Noble Truths, which is the best one, is the first one, which is all of life is suffering. That's the first noble truth. Then he also gives the Eightfold Path. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever read that or seen that. Like I said, think over thousands of years ago that these teachings were done, but the Eightfold Path is something that I don't think many people on this earth could even follow right now. It's a very, very difficult path. But he says, this is the path I took, this is what I see, and this is how you can become like me. So let's recap the story. Kid has everything, spoiled, happier than heck. Then he all of a sudden discovers life is horrible, and horrible is going to be coming for me pretty soon too. So I have to avoid this. Very human thing, right? Very human experience. We go through that. I got to get away from this. I'm going to do it by following these priests, following these people who know divine, God, or they can talk to him somehow. And I'm going to find this way to be able to find my peace. Suffers, goes through hell, pretty much. Actually does go through hell when he meets Mara. And completely, finally, finds his peace, finds enlightenment, and says, this is great. I'm going to share it with the world. And his story has, for hundreds, thousands of years. Now let's think about modern day Buddhism. How do you use it in this life today? How do you use that story? I found that when I was working at high school, a lot of teenagers liked Buddhism. It was a Catholic high school, and a lot of them were thinking, you know what, I think Buddhism has it right. But doesn't it make sense that it has it right for those teenagers? Because part of Buddhism is leaving, getting away from home, getting away from everything you were taught that you believe is a lie, and deciding, I'm going to go it alone. I'm going to go on my own. I want the adventure. So think about that. Think about how Buddhism works at different times of your life. You know, maybe as a teenager wanting to get away from his family and deciding, I want to go to college, I want to do these things. Buddhism is very effective during that time. It's something that can be very helpful. I want to tell you that I think the best things I've learned from Buddhism is from a book called Buddha Brain, and it is written by neurologists, I believe. And these men explain why Buddhism works, how it works in terms of the way our minds work. They explain that we have pretty much like caveman brains, and that we have a way of being able to understand and doing something in life, and suffering. I don't like that. I don't like that. And you know, 20 years, let's say it's a location, an alley, a dark alley somewhere, you know, like Batman. You leave for 20 years, come back to that alley, and the way your mind works is like, oh my God, it's like I'm reliving it. I'm experiencing it again. That's the way it feels sometimes, doesn't it? The way, what do we call it now? Triggers? Stuff like that. Okay, so in this book, The Buddha Brain, they teach why Buddhism works so well. It's because of mindfulness. It's being able to get rid of all that noise in your head, or explain to yourself in some way that when you go through these situations again, if you're mindful, if you are not just the caveman brain, you don't have to suffer again in the same way. It's something that was there to teach you. It wasn't something there to have you avoid life. And avoiding life is the dark side of Buddhism. Just like that book, The Buddha Brain, is something that's light. The dark side of Buddhism is isolation. I kind of feel bad saying this a little bit, explaining this, but there is a documentary. It's 2-part on HBO, and it is called The Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling. I loved it, and at the same time, it was completely sad. Gary Shandling, I'm not sure if you know about comics, but during the 80s, you know, comics, it was a big deal. There was a lot of heat going towards them, and money and entertainment, and a lot of these comics, you know, ended up getting TV shows or movie deals because they were so funny. So let's think about like Robin Williams or Bill Cosby with The Cosby Show. There were many comics during this time, and Gary Shandling was coming up during this time. And he was not someone who was about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He was actually very disciplined with his comedy, and he was very dedicated. And as he went further, he just became more and more brilliant. I think that it was really sad at the point of the documentary where you see that a tragic occurrence that happened in his childhood kept coming up, and it wasn't getting dealt with in the right way. And he really turned to Buddhism quite a bit throughout his life. But as you see, as it went further, his Buddhism it led to a bit of isolation. Now, the part of the story that gets tricky is when you see that there are challenges that are coming up in the later years of his life, and he relies on Buddhism to calm himself, to stay focused, mindful. As you watch the documentary, you see that these tragic occurrences that happened in his childhood, they're kind of coming up, these different things about family, about marriage, and he's having a tough time. And it seems like at that time, what he should have done was jumped into the battle, jumped into the story, recognized what was going on in the past, and recognized where it needed to be changed in the present. And I think, and from what I saw in the documentary, is that he actually stepped away. He went deeper into meditation and deeper into isolation, and it kind of pulled him out of the fight of life. That's really sad, because I do see where I myself and many other people too, when you're going through some really difficult things, you just decide, there's a time when you can take a retreat, but then there's not coming back from that retreat, which leads to isolation. It leads to, I'm not going back to these problems. And some of these problems are actually what make you great in life. It's what creates your legend. It's confronting these obstacles. Think of the movie It, with these grown adults who can't function right or aren't really successful because they haven't taken care of things in the past. They didn't just go off and meditate to find their way out of it. They had to go back, and they had to go through hell to be able to win. So this is where I believe that Buddhism, in some way, if you don't understand the story and don't understand where the Buddha had hardcore life struggles to achieve his enlightenment, that we all have to go through our struggles. We all have to face our demons. And trying to find a vacation in your own mind or in here only can make you avoid life. It can guide you into avoiding life and avoiding your obstacles, which is where you become a hero. So, something to think about when it comes to Buddhism and where you want to apply it in your life nowadays. So, next, I would like to talk about Islam. And at this day and age, in this time, this new millennium, we see Islam and Muslims probably associated with Osama bin Laden, the ban on terrorists and Muslims coming into the United States, and these very difficult things coming up. And it's really sad, because the story of Islam and the story of the Prophet Muhammad is just awesome. Another great story, and that's why it's lasted so long. So, when it comes to the story of Muhammad as the hero, he was born, the word that keeps coming up when they talk about Muhammad's birth is that it was a noble birth. And he was a noble person, a noble man. So nobility keeps on coming a lot when it comes to his history. He was born, his father died before he was born. His mother died not too long after in his childhood. So you see that he was pretty much an orphan, He wasn't sent away. He was sent with family, so he was able to still live a happy life, but it was without his mother and father. When it comes to his later life, you see that he has also a noble marriage in a way. He marries a woman who had a choice of all these different suitors, and because she was older than him, she could have picked anyone who everyone thought would be greater than Muhammad, but because she saw that he was a noble man, she picked him. And they had a great marriage. They made a lot of money. They were very good in business. And this is what happened in the city of Mecca. And from that time, this is where the story kind of changes a little bit, where he has some similar things to the Buddha, well, maybe not the Buddha, but he goes away. He goes away into certain place in, let's say, the mountains or the hills, away from society, away from people. And he goes off to pray and be with himself and kind of listen. And it's during this time, on one of these occasions, that he is met by the angel Gabriel, the messenger. That's the birth of Islam. That's Muhammad coming back and saying, I have a message. What I love most about Muhammad's message is that he says, I am not too much different from Abraham or from Moses or from Jesus. I'm here to tell you that there is one God, and that you in the city of Mecca have been following different gods. Maybe even in your family line, you follow this certain God or that certain God, and we're a little bit lost right now. We have to get back, just like those prophets explained before us, that we have to get back to the belief that there is one God, monotheism. That didn't go well with the people of Mecca. And this is where the story starts getting kind of tough, because it became a threat to people. Any kind of new teachings, even when they're right and they're correct, and you even know in your heart, the fact that they're new or different can really get some people upset. And that's exactly what happened. The way the story goes is that Muhammad fled the city of Mecca. and he left to, I believe the town was called, please don't be upset with me if I'm wrong, Medina. And it is at this town of Medina where he ended up building up kind of the beliefs and the structure of Islam. And the people from Mecca eventually traveled out to Medina to fight him and to kill him. And the way the story goes is that there were thousands of numbers, and he only had like maybe 100 followers that were believing in his religion, or it wasn't a religion at the time, but his teachings. This is where the story gets really cool, because over the next couple of years, those numbers changed. The people who came to attack him were in lower numbers, and the followers of Islam were in the thousands. So his army grew because of the belief in his teachings. And with a strong army, years later, they return to Mecca and they take back the city of Mecca and they win. He and his armies, he and his religion. And that's, from what I know of it, is pretty much the story of Muhammad and the birth of Islam. How does that story play out in modern life? Think about it, okay? Because if you see that this is a religion that was kind of born in fighting, and I want you to think about this because there was a frontline edition with a woman who was with the terrorist Muslim groups, and she came back after reporting on them and saying, is like, you guys have to know what you're up against. Because I've been with these armies, I've been with these groups, and I know who they are. And they believe that they are the underdog. They believe that they are the rebels. They actually know the movie Star Wars and believe that they are like the heroes in Star Wars. And that you, the United States, are the empire. You're the ones who run everything, own everything. You try to push your religion on everybody. You try to push your economy on everybody and your dollar on everybody. And you try to take from all the little people. So you got to understand, they're never going to quit. That's where they get their power and their understanding and their belief, and that's why they never stop. Is because they believe they're fighting for what's right. They are the underdog, and they are fighting the authority who's telling them that their religion is wrong. I want you to think about that when you think about Islam in modern day society, because when you look at rebels and you look at what they're about, you might see some similarities. You might see where they are going to always be fighting because of their belief. If you can, I would like to encourage you to watch a documentary. I think it's a really good one. It is narrated by Ben Kingsley, and it is called Islam, Empire of Faith. I believe it might even be on YouTube for free. You can watch it. I think I saw it on PBS, or I rented the DVD. It is beautiful. It explains the story way better than I can do it. And it explains the relationship between Islam and Christianity over the years and how they actually even got along. It's amazing. Great story. And I think a much healthier depiction of Islam in our modern day. And finally, I would like to finish with Christianity. I was raised Catholic, so this is the story that I know. I was at Catholic school from first grade all the way until 12th, okay? So I saw and understood how you teach a child about Jesus and the devil compared to when you get into, your senior year of high school, and after taking comparative religions and all these other different things, how you understand Jesus in a later year. When it comes to the story, if you don't know it, Jesus was a prophet. He, and the first teachings of him, and the first stories, his big thing wasn't being born of a virgin and the manger and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't. The big part of the story was him going away into the desert and being confronted by the devil and tempted by the devil, and him saying no. And Jesus comes back and says, I have a message. And that message upset a lot of people, especially the people who wear the garbs and study and do all these different things and are hearing him say, you don't have to follow everything in the book. Okay? The teachings and these certain teachings that you are passed down to us, that's not everything. There's more to it. Teachers don't like that. Authority doesn't like that. They don't like when you're starting to pull people away from their audience or their group or their money that they receive. So Jesus has the archetype of prophecy, as you can see. He went to the other side, saw other things other than what other human beings do, and then gives back a message. Now, you can see this message really offends a lot of people, hurts a lot of people, because the way the story eventually goes is that because of his message of love, of peace, he is crucified. He is beaten, tortured, and killed. And his story, the big winning part, is that he comes back. He does what no other human being on earth has been able to do. He is the one who defied death. I'm not like all of you. I can do this because I'm God. That's the story. And that is what Christians believe makes their religion different from everyone else's and makes it better, is that their leader, their hero, their teacher was actually God on earth. So let's talk about Christianity in modern day society, okay? I mean, you see it everywhere, right? I mean, you see the amount of money that goes into it, the power that it has. We have, I live in the United States, and in the United States, it's like, oh yeah, sure, we accept all types of people, all types of religions, but Christianity's number one, so let's stick to that, right? You know, we're not changing that. That's pretty much the way it is here. I mean, people don't want to say that, but it is. And because of that, I think there's a lot of power, there's a lot of war, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of abuse that is behind that religion, Christianity. And it's really sad because it can teach you, the religion of Christianity can teach you a lot about your own self. Now let's do that then. Let's think about the story. It's similar to the Buddha's, right? Because he goes off and he suffers a little bit, or suffers maybe a lot more than we usually do, and then has followers and goes out and teaches, right? Very similar to Muhammad's in some way, as the prophet also is, because he gives his teachings and then his teachings are rejected and people start getting angry and people start wanting to kill him over his teachings, right? And where this story is different is that he dies, but he comes back. And in this story, maybe you don't really think about it too much, but this story, what exactly is it teaching you? What is it selling to you? It's telling you, listen, you have this fear of death inside, and it's in there even when you don't think about it. It's in there every day and every night. But if you follow me, you won't die. You won't die ever. You will be in paradise. And that is a great story that we really like, right? Someone who comes from a special place, in a special way to this earth. He, has a glowing heart that's full of love. He's able to heal. He's able to heal people. And people are just like, no, get him out of here. Dies, comes back to life, and then says, you know what? I'm going to go home now. Be good. Wait, isn't that E.T.? Guy who comes from a different place. Yeah, maybe that's E.T., right? Wait, what about that glowing heart, though? And the dying, and the coming back to life. No, I can't be, right? But E.T. wasn't killed. Oh wait, but Neo was killed, right? I mean, he died pretty bad. I mean, he got shot up, and then he came back too. Is it a big mystery that the movies I'm talking about right now are some of the highest grossing movies of all time? In fact, if you look at the highest grossing movies of all time, many of them have these themes. Is there a chance that that story, the story of Jesus, and the reason why so many people follow it, is because of this thing inside of you, this innate feeling or understanding or knowledge that you're going to die, the same one that Buddha had, and that in some way believing that you won't die gives you some kind of daily peace, some kind of satisfaction. These stories are so important. I can't emphasize that enough. That's the whole thing behind Legendary Daddy, is it's legend. It's your own legend. It's creating your own story. When you want to get on your spiritual path and you want to get that, you want to raise your spirit, there is so much in those stories, in those books. They're golden. You understand? They're like really, really important. So don't disregard the religion just because of an abusive priest or a terrorist who's doing something in the name of Allah. Don't push those things away. In fact, that's where you might even be able to start with going to the roots of your religion, because they can help you on your spiritual path. So I hope this message helped. If it did, maybe you can consider liking and subscribing to my channel. I have more things I'm going to be putting out that, have to do with spirituality. But for right now, when it comes down to it, I hope you just got the gist of religions can really teach you a lot. Don't let other people, mess it up for you. The stories are golden, and they can really teach you something about yourself, and they can teach you maybe even too along your spiritual path. Which one sounds more true to me? Is it the one with the more mindfulness, the one with, the group, the family that sticks together and stays strong, or the one where I'm much bigger than my physical body, that, there's something inside of me that's not really going to die? Just check them out for yourself, but don't ever forget them. I have a vlog that's about meditation for beginners. You might want to check out that, because when I started, I didn't know exactly where to start as a Christian, but it was very simple, very easy. Just took a little bit of time every day, and it made a huge change. So thank you for watching. I wish you love, and I wish you peace in your life, and I wish you great adventures on your spiritual journey. Peace, and I mean it.